chat box open in the window. When can also indicate that you want to speak by clicking the raise hand tab on the right side of the chat window. The session will also be telecasted live on SDPI's Facebook page. For those watching us on Facebook Live, please write your questions in the chat there. They will be conveyed to the speakers through our teams. The seminar will be recorded and the video will be posted online. You are welcome to revisit the discussion later and feel free to share it with your network. Views expressed during all webinars are the views of their respected speakers and do not represent the policy of the organizations. Our panel for today's include Dr. Abid Qayyum Soleri, Executive Director, SDPI, will be opening the session with his remarks. Ms. Andalib Abbas, Members National Assembly and Parliamentary Secretary for Foreign Affairs. Ms. Tammy Sharp, Deputy Representative, United Nations High Commissions for Refugees, Pakistan. Brigadier Mahmood Shah, Security and Defense Analyst. Senior Journalist writer Zaid Hussain has also joined the session. Today's session will be moderated by Ms. Aisha Elias, Coordinator, Advocacy and Outreach, SDPI. Now I hand over the session to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Amjad. As we know, the fluid situation in Afghanistan since Taliban formally took over Kabul on August 15 has stirred worries in all quarters. Humanitarian actors are warning against brewing up of another crisis, and I'd not say that the crisis ahead would be limited to Afghanistan only. UNHCR suggests that since January 2021, over 270,000 Afghans have been internally displaced. These people include women and children, have migrated to areas near the borders and transit points, and have been waiting to cross over the neighboring countries. Out of these 270,000 people, only a very small number of people can afford getting out of the country, and the remaining large number of them need humanitarian assistance such as food, drinking water, shelter, medical care, hygiene kits, and cash for their basic needs and essentials. Beside the IRC, International Rescue Committee fears that Afghan women and girls may have limited access to humanitarian assistance with the mounting uncertainty throughout Afghanistan, and is concerned of an increase in violence against women. There are also concerns of the security of religious and ethnic minorities in the country. One thing that I believe is a major issue widely ignored is food insecurity, which persists in the country, and it is feared that it might increase if the uncertain and volatile situation continues. According to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, 1 in 3 people in Afghanistan does not know where their next meal will come from. And an earlier nutrition survey found alarming rates of malnutrition among children. More children may add up to the tally of malnourished and stunned amid growing uncertainty about access to food. These are some aspects of the crisis in the country that needs attention from the international community and that we are here to discuss today. And I'll request Dr. Abid Soleri, Executive Director, SDPI, who is also a member of Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, to shed some light on the role of international community, the role that international community can play in easing the miseries of Afghans in his opening remarks, especially from the angle of food security. Over to you, Dr.
Abid. Thank you, Aisha. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, dear viewers and dear participants who are following us on our Facebook Live and who are also following us on our STTV, depending from where you have logged in. And a very warm good afternoon to all the worthy panelists who have joined us today, Honorable Ms. Andalib Abbas Sahiba, Ms. Tammy Sharp, Brigadier Mahmood Saab, and our very dear friend Zaid Hussain. Today's discussion, and I'm looking forward to learn from the 4 worthy panelists their point of view, is basically organized in an attempt that STPI is making to differentiate and to separate the ground realities, what is happening in Afghanistan, with our emotions. So what I found for last 2 weeks, that the emotions and realities, they are mixed together depending whatever part of the spectrum we are following, depending upon the polarization around the situation in Afghanistan. So first and foremost is try to see that what are the ground realities, what is happening there, and keeping our emotions aside and try to see the purely humanitarian aspect of it. And when I say humanitarian aspect, I also ask this question to myself that while the media, both Western as well as our part of the world, we have been defining Afghanistan as a graveyard of empires. We perhaps are not highlighting the graves of human beings over there as well. And again, I'm referring to humanitarian crisis, be it's due to war and conflict, or it's due to food insecurity, or it's due to a COVID situation, which is actually is getting very little importance when we see the overall coverage in Afghanistan. So while we see a lot about other socio-economic issues, which are very much there, but how much of testing was done, how much of testing is done nowadays, what is the percentage of this COVID situation, and how the to-be host countries who may be asked to host some of the refugees, how prepared they are, not only about the refugees, but also about the COVID, containing the COVID and other variants. Those things, they are not discussed. And finally, one thing that I want to learn from the worthy panelists is about the overall governance situation. So while we would find again in media and in mainstream analysis, so we keep on blaming different external actors, starting from Russians to Americans, for all the mess that has happened in Afghanistan. But what was the role of governance and the writ of law, rule of law, and the way the society is shaped? So again, very little discussion is done on it. So to me, Afghanistan today seems to be a big elephant, and then most of us, we are 7 visually challenged people who try to define that elephant from our own perspective, and depending which part of elephant we are touching, we are explaining it from that perspective. So perhaps there are a lot of half-truth, and the reason we had this 4 diversified speakers today from 4 different spectrum of society, and having 4 different sets of expertise is our attempt to bring these pieces of jigsaw puzzle together and try to, and I'm using the word try to, somehow transit towards completion of that picture, which of course today's webinar would not be able to do. Perhaps we need to hold quite a few these objective discussions in order to complete that picture. But it is our humble contribution to attempt to try to complete that picture. This is the first of it's a seminar series from STPI, and we would be actually organizing quite a few seminars trying to discuss in a threadbare manner different aspects of evolving Afghan situation. Thank you very much, Aisha, and thank you for the panelists for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Abid. We have Ms. Andali Abbas with us, Member Parliament and Parliamentary Secretary for Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Ms. Andali, for joining us. Pakistan has one of the largest refugee population in the world, which unfortunately are primarily Afghans. We have a bond with the Afghans that no other country in the world has, but there are still issues of governance, law and order, and resources that we have to consider, since our primary responsibility is towards our own people. How do a government see that unfolding for both the countries? The current crisis, how do we see that unfolding for both the countries? Your mic is mute.
Thank you so much, STPI, for this very important discussion on Afghanistan. I think all of us have been taken by surprise at the speed of the events that have happened in Afghanistan. There was obviously advance being made towards this particular happening, but it would happen so sudden, has taken everybody a little, I would say, unprepared. And so, at this moment, Afghanistan is still in a small vacuum because the government has not been formed. And as a neighboring country, our interest in Afghanistan, our stakes in Afghanistan in every way, whether it is geopolitical, whether it is socio-cultural, whether it is humanitarian, is very high. We have experienced this, that in the last 20 years, while there was a war going on in Afghanistan, there was a war going on in Pakistan as well. And that is why the government has been very, very clear in its policy that for Pakistan to be stable and progressing, Afghanistan has to be stable and progressing. It's like, you know, the Siamese twins, as you call them. So the twins are both sort of, you know, there's this link. They're two different people, but they're still linked very heavily, emotionally, socially, politically, and border-wise as well. So I think the main concern that we have over here is that what happened 20 years ago should not happen again. 20 years ago, as you know, there was a complete chaos. There was a civil war. There was an influx of refugees. There was a humanitarian crisis. There was a political crisis. There was a violent terrorism crisis. And both the countries suffered hugely, especially Pakistan, which had 80,000 casualties in 20 years and over 150 billion lost in economic terms. So this time, I think the change and the good thing is that it was not violent. The takeover happened quickly, but it did not have a civil war. And so far in the 2 weeks, we are seeing more calm than it was last time. And we are hoping that this situation quickly solves itself into some certainty, because uncertainty is what is prevailing over there. And uncertainty is a great cancer for stability and development. So that's what we are requesting. That's what we are requesting the international community. That's what we are looking at, you know, the stakeholders in Kabul. We have talked previously to them as well as a government. We are talking to them as well that the sooner the inclusive government is made, the better it is for Afghanistan, the better it is for the stability in the region, and the better it is for the world as well. So the first priority as a government was that we you know, make sure that the stable government takes place over there. But once the government does form over there, which is probably in a day or two, the bigger questions loom then. And those are huge questions. And those are about sustainability. Because at the moment, the Afghan economy is in tatters. It was already very fragile. And we know that it's about minus 9.7%, you know, and going down and down and down. Because the international community is not going to be very forthcoming as far as aid is concerned till the situation clears politically, the run on the banks and the uncertainty and the, you know, the deficit and damage to the businesses and trade over there is going to exacerbate. And that's what we are very concerned about, because if that keeps on happening, then there's going to be inflation, there's going to be unrest, there's going to be unemployment. That itself may lead to a humanitarian crisis. That itself may lead to more conflict. And that is why it is to the interest of Pakistan, and that on the basis that we have shared a history where we have hosted about 3.5 million refugees over there, and we don't want a repeat of that. We have, you know, they are like our brothers and sisters, and we have the utmost love for them, but Pakistan cannot afford, we don't have the capacity to afford more refugees. So our complete focus is that the political government takes shape, and we also talk, as you see, we have a lot of international foreign ministers coming to Pakistan. The Dutch foreign minister was here last night. The German foreign minister was here a day before. We are expecting the British foreign minister also. And so our plea to them is that we must continue the international humanitarian development effort over there, because if we don't, then in any case, there's going to be, a situation where people are going to be running. Already I hear that about, 600,000 people or 650,000 people are internally displaced. And so if you don't have jobs, especially in the rural areas and the other cities, they're all going to rush into other cities, and the other cities are going to get clogged, and then everybody's going to rush to the border. But now the situation is different on the borders as well, because we fenced it. And so what we are looking at is a complete focus, number one, on political development of the government, and that should be an inclusive and broad-based government. We are also trying to convince the international community to continue with the aid efforts, as Afghanistan really needs help at this time. Women, children, elders, senior citizens, they're all at risk at the moment. And three, very important, that the refugee factor is minimized, because I think the appetite for having refugees was very little, I must say. In the other countries, very few countries have really hosted refugees. It's been Pakistan, Turkey, and a few others who have been really generous to that respect. But even there, there is absolutely very little room for it. So from our government side, as you know, what we've done is that we have extended all help to the international aid agencies. We have offered to them that, their personnel can come over here. We can take their, we can take whatever aid they have. We can act as a transit point from here. We have also, from our own side, delivered medicines and health and other emergency goods to them, and we will keep on doing, because they are our part. I mean, the whole point is that we and Afghanistan, our fates are together, and we would like that this particular opportunity or threat, as you see, this can be opportunity to rebuild Afghanistan if everybody comes together, unlike last time, and doesn't abandon them and doesn't just run away. If everybody comes and does their part, Afghanistan can come out of this quagmire. But if we just shy away from it and keep on waiting for things to happen, unfortunately, things will become worse. So Pakistan is focused, committed, and doing all it can to prevent Afghanistan going into more conflict, more humanitarian crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjali. And as you rightly pointed about the reluctance in accepting refugees in the countries around, and especially in the West, I'll take this question to Ms. Tammy Sherpe. UNHCR has warned about an expected surge in refugees ahead. What are the measures that we need to take, considering there are apprehensions in the West, as pointed out by Andalib as well, especially about accepting refugees, and also considering the fact that countries like Pakistan are doing more than what they are legally bound to do, since we are not even the signatories of International Refugee Commission. How do we sensitize the more privileged countries to be more responsible in their acceptance of refugees and their inclusion into their societies? Tammy, you'll have to unmute your mic.
Okay. Thank you very much. I had a little bit of challenge there with my internet recently, so I hope this will not go back out on me. Measures to take. First, allow me to say thank you for inviting us We are happy to be here and to participate in what I personally, and even more importantly, my organization, UNHCR, sees as a topic of critical importance. As has been noted and highlighted, we currently have 1.4 million registered Afghan refugees here in Pakistan now. And that is in addition to an additional couple million, some who are documented and some who have an Afghan citizenship card, bringing it up to close to around 3 million. And yes, Pakistan has been hosting Afghan refugees for 4 decades now. And in those 4 decades, Pakistan has been one of the largest refugee hosting countries globally. It's been number 1, number 2, number 3 over these 4 decades. And it's really remarkable. The government, and even more so the people of Pakistan, have been very generous, very hospitable in welcoming millions of Afghans for this very long time period. And the approach in this country has been progressive, it's stellar, and you are truly one of the stewards of refugee protection around the world and holding that up. And it is a right. Refugee rights are at risk globally in many different kind of contexts. And so we are very much alert to the situation, very much looking at how do we help states? How do we work with states? How do we work with other partners, the humanitarian community, the development actors, our donors, different member states that are also there? And how do we uphold the right to seek asylum? As you noted when we first started off, the situation in Afghanistan is very fluid and it's changing every day. There, since the beginning of 2021, more than 600,000 people have been forcibly displaced inside Afghanistan. Some of this is in the past few weeks. This is in addition to 2.9 million people that were internally displaced at the end of 2020. And it's complex, it's changing, it's shifting. There is no, you can't just say it's not static, because in addition to displacement, we're also seeing where some of these people have started to return in relatively significant numbers in the last couple of weeks. And so we're closely watching how the situation will evolve, and we'll adapt and we'll continue to see how to go forward. We could see more displacement internally, externally. We could also see return that could take place. And I think, as was highlighted just now, it's very much going to depend on what happens and what the Taliban can do. Can they stabilize the security situation? Are they going to be able to establish rule of law? Will they be able to build an inclusive government? Are they going to be able to protect Afghans' human rights, particularly that of women and children? And then I think it's also, and this kind of goes to the point too, when it was flagged that there's emotions in there. And this isn't a very important component to remember, because within all those very large, tremendous tasks that I just listed that are before the Taliban now, the Taliban also need to gain the trust of Afghans. Afghans have known the Taliban for decades. In the past, sadly, Taliban has also committed some gross human rights violations and imposed a very repressive regime against women and girls. So now we feel at the UN side that the onus is on the Taliban to translate their commitments to uphold human rights, including those of women and girls, into reality. The UN is eager to welcome an Afghanistan that is inclusive, abides by its human rights obligations, and is a partner in suppressing terrorism. And we're fully committed to helping Afghanistan achieve durable peace and stability. And we welcome, in particular, all the efforts by the government of Pakistan in trying to promote peace and stability in Afghanistan, and all the different means that have been put in place to also support the UN and humanitarian actors to be able to stay and deliver in Afghanistan. And that is, we are firmly behind that right now. we, with our partners, are currently operating aid programs in nearly 2/3 of Afghanistan. And that is our intent. And we will stay there and deliver as long as the security conditions allow us to do that. But I would be neglecting the role of UNHCR if I did not underscore that it's a fluid and complex context. And because of that, and because of some of the uncertainty that's been underscored, because of the need for trust, all the different emotions that are in there, we really need to uphold the right to seek asylum. It is an incredible responsibility of a hosting country, and this does disproportionately fall on the neighboring countries, and it has for the last 40 years, definitely. Yet within that, people are already moving across borders, and they've been mixing in with this regular and what you see as a very rather large movements between the two countries. And sometimes this reaches up into the tens of thousands on a daily basis. But mixed within that has been a silent trickle of people that have been coming into the country since April, seeking refuge. We at UNHCR, and I think you had mentioned a couple of actors that have flagged this, are concerned about the risk of human rights violations in the current evolving situation in Afghanistan. We're also worried about those who could be caught up in the crossfires of general insecurity. But we need to be aware of the reality, and we need to hold this up. Many people are fleeing insecurity. Some are fleeing due to their work with the previous government, including the Afghan military. Some have fled for working within the previous rule of law system, such as lawyers and police officers. Some have fled due to their work as peace and human rights activists or for their ethnicity. And some of these people are women who have fled for being in the forefront of defending and advancing gender equality. And here I want to underscore another emotion, that is the emotion of fear. These people are fearing for their lives. And this is integrated, it's an integral part of the refugee definition on that. And it's like, do you have a credible fear of persecution in your country for different reasons? The number of them that I've just outlined here as to why these people are fleeing. And this is important, and we can't lose sight. And a lot of times there's a lot of emphasis on numbers, how many people are here, how many have come. But I think it's very important that we focus on the stories, the people, their faces. And I would really encourage all of us to dare to just imagine the type of fear that these people are fearing in that place. And so the measures are there's many of them. There's many things that need to be done. But if we come together and we can put in place plans, then we can tackle all these areas, and we can call on the international community to come forward. And right now, we are nonstop receiving requests from our key donors saying, what do you need? What needs to be done? How do we move forward? And this is a time where we can collectively try to respond and not allow the responsibility to allow people to seek asylum, to provide refuge, to be disproportionately put on the shoulders of the government of Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. And I'd also take this opportunity to applaud all the good work that UNHCR has carried out in the country over the years, and in Pakistan during a war on terror with the IDPs. Talking of war on terror, Brigadier Mahmood Shah Sahab is a defense analyst, and he has been the Home Secretary at a very crucial point in history. Brigadier Sahab, while the threats of civil war loom over Afghanistan, terrorist activities like the recent attack on Kabul airport by ISIS further aggravate the humanitarian crisis that is created by the hasty withdrawal and the fleeing of Ghani government. What are the probable options for Afghanistan, for the neighboring countries like Pakistan, who has combated terrorism at home, and for countries like Iran and Russia and China, in which in help calming the situation to the benefit of the common people of Afghanistan. You'll have to unmute your mic.
Thank you very much for having invited me to this very august panel. My salams to all the participants and all the speakers. Yes, I think when we were looking at this situation right at the beginning, 20 years ago, we thought this war was unnecessary. This war was not required. No Afghans was involved in attack on Twin Towers. These were some Middle Eastern groups who were involved in that, and US decided to invade Afghanistan. Right from the beginning, we said this is wrong. And as the time passed, and initially they sought for some advice, and we asked them that, okay, militarily, you have invaded Afghanistan and you have occupied it. The military job is over. Now it's basically a political sort of issue. You need to sit down and really sort out things. They did not agree. And they were like looking for one man by the name of Osama bin Laden. Whereas our efforts mostly were against terrorism on a very broad front. So we differed and we advised them because right initially, Afghanistan is a tribal country. It is tribal people, they live there. They have their own code, they have their own systems how to. Previously, USSR made this mistake of coming to Afghanistan and tried to put their communism sort of ideology on people who were not really prepared for it. They were not going to take it anyway. And we then said that USSR will have to go back. Nobody believed us, but this is what we had the feeling. And we saw the USSR having gone and having disintegrated also in the process. The West thought that they have disintegrated USSR, whereas there were more claimants in Afghanistan, and they knew who has done it. So with that sort of background, the Americans also came and we told them. They did not listen, and they stayed here for 20 years. And after 20 years, they came to the sad conclusion that they have to go back. And we said yes, because if you are going to stay for another 10 years, the result would be the same. So basically, it is an issue which is a political issue, which has other dimensions like cultural, social, and so these dimensions. And these social changes do not come about with military power or with force or within a certain time frame. They will take their own time. So I think we have come, this is an era of truth, I would say. This is the truth that we are looking at. How will Afghanistan do? It will revert back to its natural style. Taliban have come, and the way they have captured the whole of the country or come over Kabul, the speed might have even surprised them. And not only they surprised everyone else, but it surprised them also. Probably they were not prepared for so easy fault. But the fact is that they are there. The world or the superpowers who were there in Afghanistan and they bombed marriages, they bombed funerals, they bombed villages, unarmed civilians, children, women, and they are asking within no time, within 10 days, they are asking what is the human rights situation, what is the woman rights in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, I can assure you, cannot become America overnight. However, there are three aspects on which the world would be assessing this Taliban government. One is their ability to work out an inclusive government. That means that all minorities have to be represented in that government. Afghanistan is a multi-ethnic country, with the Pashtuns accounting for about 50%, but the remaining, like Tajiks, account for 19%, and Uzbeks account for about 11%, and then there are small ethnicities. All these have to be included in the inclusive government that we say. So their ability to do so, and they are prepared to do it, and I think they are negotiating it, and they might have worked out quite a few. Do you think they had a promise made with the US that they will not announce the inclusive government till the US clears out Afghanistan? So I think that is the first sort of thing. The second, which we do not talk about normally, but it is very essential, the ability of Taliban government or the government, inclusive government they make, that they will not let the Afghan side be used against any neighbor. It is particularly Pakistan and China, TTP and BLA against Pakistan, and this independent movement of projects against China. I think they have promised this during the negotiations. So this is the second aspect, their ability, because that's not only the ability that they will not allow it to be used, but in fact they will prevent all violent groups to come into Afghanistan again. And that was the one which damaged Afghanistan. Those were the Middle Eastern groups who had their own vengeance against America, and they came into Afghanistan. They were living here, and that is why Afghanistan became a target for the Western or the American forces. So they are not going to do that. This is very, very essential. It is a must, and I think we have conveyed it. It is not that we are not prepared to sort of face those situations. We have faced it for so much of time. We have reorganized our western border with them, which we had neglected previously. And now we have put barbed wire and some forts, and we have re-raised FC, Frontier Corps, for it. And it will be able to take care of it defensively. But it is in the interest of Afghanistan that these violent groups do not return to Afghanistan one way or the other, and they start using Afghanistan side in a sort of conjunction with the other parts, vested interests, and those they act like a proxy and so on and so forth. And the third aspect is, of course, human rights situation, particularly the women rights that they are talking about. And I think they have agreed that yes, they have their women's right for education, women's right to work. And they have accepted that, but they say that it will be done within the Sharia. And of course, Sharia or Islam for that matter has many interpretations. It is a moderate religion, but some people would like to be very strict, and that is where the problem arises. But Taliban now, if they are ready for an inclusive government and work with those people who really do not ascribe to Taliban ideologies, but they are prepared to be part of the government. I think if a government is made which is inclusive and which has all those people, ethnicities with their own sort of ideas, it will be a moderate government. But in case Taliban fail to do this, and finally they are forced to make only Taliban government, then probably it will not be moderate. We must be aware of this, and that is why we insist that All these people, Taliban have had government and they were very strict with the Sharia and so on and so forth. And you found that many people did not agree with them. So we have told them that you have to take these people along. They belong to Afghanistan and they want to live in Afghanistan. And you have to make the government in such a manner so they can live. But if you make very strict laws, then of course it will be difficult. So I think they are prepared. The only thing is that it's only have been so many weeks just for the Afghan government asking for results in such a short time is really again not being very fair with them. Let them make the government, let them function for some time, and then you will see whether they can do it or they cannot do it. Many people who are doubting this because the previous Afghan Taliban leaders were not really educated. They were very small people. Most of the people who got either their arms cut or their leg cut, they were doing teaching in madrasa. They were the ones who got together against those commanders who had made life miserable for people, who were violators of human rights. You know, they will pick up women, they will pick up children, they will pick up boys. And these very people got together. People told them, please get us rid from this. So they basically came for implementation of human rights. They did not understand it in those many manners, but they were the ones to give protection to people. Why are these commanders picking up women of their choice, and why are they picking up boys, and why are they imposing tax on why they have sort of chains on the road? And our first reaction on the Taliban who came in and started taking over areas, we thought that at least people in Afghanistan will start getting their food stuff into their houses, because the foodstuff items which were going for Pakistan were being taxed on every chain, and they were not reaching people, and people were dying of hunger. So the basic purpose of this movement came into being was for human rights, for human protection, for allowing the foodstuff to go to these villages. The way half of Afghanistan, more than half of Afghanistan is dependent on Pakistan. To this eastern Afghanistan, everything goes from Peshawar. From these sort of mountains, they go, whether it is wheat, whether it is rice, whether it is even vegetables go from this place to this place. And the other half is dependent on Quetta. Things flow out from there. And these Afghans, they come and they make purchases in the market, and they put it in trucks and they go to Afghanistan. The Afghanistan government, with the previous government, even the present governments, do not have the figures with them as to how much is your requirement of wheat, so that we, Pakistan, say that we will give you that much of wheat. There is no problem. We want to sell it, and you want to purchase it, and you are paying money for it. So there is no issue. But the Afghan government is not prepared. The other problem is that now with these people are
crunched for time, so if you could kindly wind up.
okay.
Sorry.
Another problem is that when these people are getting into the government and trying to organize, there is a brain drain on Afghanistan. The Western countries are helping in that, and all the people who are able people, who are qualified people, they are leaving Afghanistan for those Western countries. This is a brain drain. Again, it will not be in favor of Afghanistan if these people leave. Who will be working in this government? The Taliban are only providing leadership. Remaining all, whether it is a health technician or if it is a school teacher or some, those are the normal people. Those normal people are leaving Afghanistan, and this brain drain is not, and I think the big powers should realize this. So with that, I'll come to the end of whatever little I had to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this very detailed overview of the situation. Zahid Hussain Saab, thank you so much for waiting. The reason that I wanted to come to you at the end is you heard all the opinions. The situation on the ground, or the one likely to emerge now, the stance of the government of Pakistan, how UNHCR is seeing it, how the region can take responsibility and help in the situation. Do you think we, the international community or Pakistan or the countries in the neighborhood, do you think we have a doable set of strategies at hand to help Afghans? You'll have to unmute your mic.
Thank you so much for having me on this panel. Well, actually, a lot have been said about some of the problems which is being faced by Afghanistan. That's true that the situation has developed very fast, and nobody has expected that change would come so quickly. Although the war has been going on in Afghanistan for 20 years, I think the Americans who invaded Afghanistan way back in 2001, it was a very chaotic entry into war. And I think much more chaotic has been the exit from the war. And if you examine actually what happened over the last 20 years, it gives a very scary situation of Afghanistan. We are just talking as it is happening now. But look actually what is the situation after 20 years of war, and Americans have spending about $1 trillion in the war effort. And look actually what is the condition of the people of Afghanistan over this year. According to reports, 72% of Afghans are living below poverty line in this situation. 72%. And 92% of Afghans are living on a wages of $2 a day. So in a way, actually, this is a catastrophic situation, humanitarian situation developing is already there. It's not developing again. And nobody is talking about it. Everybody is talking about what should Taliban be doing. Yes, Taliban has to do a lot actually, because, and return of Taliban, one should also examine when the people said, yes, actually, there's lots of concern about the return of Taliban, but they should also ask, why did it happen to Afghanistan? The people who had ruled, who had invaded Afghanistan, when they left, actually, one question is Afghanistan better off now after 20 years? As far as the humanitarian problems are concerned, I think it's pretty clear that what's with this data and statistics, 92% of Afghans living on $2 per day. So it means actually that they don't know actually where the next meal is coming from. And on top of it, we have seen the war has displacing people. It's not just about the migration to other countries. If you examine actually what has been happening over the last 20 years, the internal migration because of the war. And according to another, I think probably it's the UNHCR or some other, out of two Afghans do not know where the next meal is coming from. And the biggest victim of all that human catastrophe is our women and children. I think it's very good to have a lecture on human rights. Yes, actually, human rights are very important, and it should be actually talked about. But they forget about the human rights of the people of Afghanistan, the rights to live a proper life. Nobody is mentioning about it. The only mention is about, yes, actually, we all value democracy. We all value actually human rights for everyone, and right to expression and rights of women. It's very important for any civilized society. But it covers up the real problem which Afghanistan is facing is a problem of poverty, is problem of displacement, and that's what actually the real issue at the moment. And little talk, like for example, actually I heard earlier speakers from UNHCR. Well, actually, yes, these are the issues. But is the West is Is the West prepared to take its responsibility? Well, it is very good to say that regional countries and neighboring countries should open their borders for the migrants. Well, they should, and they have been doing this. Pakistan has been just mentioned about 3 million people are living here. Iran has maybe have the equal number, and so have some other regional countries have. But what about West? Are they prepared to open their borders for those people? They are taking away only those people who had served there. But what about the 90% of Afghans who are living in poverty? They are not going to, like I've seen very well, actually, Americans take pride that 120,000 people have been airlifted. But what about the others? The European countries, they have set up quota. Like, for example, Germany is taking 20,000 migrants. And Britain reluctantly was also taking 20,000. But we are asked to open our borders. On top of it, actually, the greatest, problem at this point of time, that yes, actually, the government has changed. Yes, actually, that's right. Actually, there's a period of uncertainty. And but what about the problem, the catastrophe, the building up, if the aid is not coming to Afghanistan? What about the people of Afghanistan? Like some of the report that if the food supply is not there, there is a danger that large number of Afghans would be suffering from famine. So are they talking about it? No, I don't hear about anything about those kind of things. They have stopped finances. Over the last 20 years, one of the longest war Americans fought. And at that point, the economic condition of Afghanistan, what was that? 80% of the finances to run Afghan government came from foreign aid and loans. And that was actually the achievement of 20 years of war. And Afghans are not actually it's not just 20 years of war. What is happening in Afghanistan, but they're talking about the poverty level. What about the plight of the people? For last 40 years, Afghans have not seen peace. And who is responsible for that? It's a very good, very nice actually when they give this lecture on human rights, on democracy, but basically the whole about the people and how did they suffer. Is anybody held responsible for that? Only in last 1 year, in the one and a half year before COVID, 62% of Afghans were living in poverty line. And within 2 years' time, the number has gone up by 10%. So, did anybody talk about it? They talk about that at that point? No. And I think probably that is the real issue. I think we heard a lot like migration. People are we may not see actually more people are coming in at this point of time in Pakistan. The reason is that basically there's a lot more displacement, and fortunately the fighting there's not been much fighting around those areas where migration could have taken place in Pakistan. But what is I think where the real threat, a real danger is what will happen in the next 1 year. Because instability is one thing, but more than that, actually, the sanctions and the economic strangulation of Afghanistan will lead to increase the suffering of Afghanistan. And most people will be coming or crossing or leaving Afghanistan would be because they cannot earn their livelihood there. So I think probably UNHCR, I just heard about representative UNHCR. There was little talk about what the responsibility of Western countries, developed countries. Do they have responsibility at all or not? Don't they have a responsibility to whatever happened to Afghans at this point? So I think probably we need to discuss this issue. Fine, Pakistan has taken its share of of refugees. There's been constant flow of refugees even in the last few years, and it will happen again. But where will the aid come from? Like 3 million refugees are coming, who are living in Pakistan for the last 40 years. 2 generations of Afghans have lived in refugee camps. How much aid has been coming out from UNHCR for them? So I think these are the questions that they are, tough questions, but they have to be answered, because we cannot sit on the high pedestal and give a lecture on morality, democracy, human rights, forgetting actually the rights of the people to live, to have their livelihood. I think there is a need to shake up the conscience of the world, the international community. And I have been hearing actually speeches of Western leaders. President Biden spoke, and when he spoke that, why did he get out of the war? Because he wanted to save the lives of Americans. Fine, I think I completely agree that that was a no-win war from the very outset, and Americans should have left Afghanistan long time ago. But when I was listening to it, the whole speech, I didn't hear a single word, whatever happened to Afghans, about the people, about the plight of Afghans, nothing. Don't they have the responsibility for that? So I think probably this is a very good to actually point out of some of the things, like what Taliban have to do. Yes, we all know that Taliban, what the regime we have witnessed in the past, it was actually in a way actually had been authoritarian, regressive. Yes, it is. It was. And the concern is valid, actually, what's going to happen now. And I think probably what gave strength to Taliban forces there was also the policy which has been actually followed in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. And that's what we saw, the resurgence of Taliban, of those people actually who had a regressive legacy. I think and at this point of time, anything, if they stop aid, if they stop, at this point of time, a financial aid or whatever, the people of Afghanistan will suffer. They left. I was seeing pictures of Americans destroying so many helicopters and jets actually which they were leaving. Must be costing about billions and billions of dollars. But what about actually people living there? They have invested $1 trillion in that, and that has pushed more Afghans into poverty. The real issue at this point of time, one should ask about Afghanistan. Yes, actually, it's very important that an inclusive government should be there for the sake of Afghanistan, for the stability, political stability of Afghanistan. But the major problem and major issue facing Afghanistan, and that should be the main point of attraction for the West, should be the plight of Afghans now, living in 72% below the poverty line, and 92% living in $2 a day. So should not that be the issue? Should not it be the priority of the international community to look at? And look, actually, if poverty remains there, if instability remains there, whatever the legacy of war is there, yes, actually, there is a real threat of is again turning into a kind of a base for a terrorist organization. We have seen actually where the terrorist groups have flourished. Those areas which are left backward, failed state, And Afghanistan, if it's continuing, it was failed state for a very, very long time. So if international community, for whatever reason, if they push further and do not actually address those issues directly related to Afghan, things will be worse. And then we will see yet again war, and that will not solve the problem. It will make the world much more unsafe. Thank you.
Thank you, Zahid Hussain Sahab. And as you rightly pointed, the legacy of the war in Afghanistan are livelihood insecurity and terrorism, which are actually form the basis of many human rights that we are listening so much about these days. We as responsible citizens of the global village that the world has become in 21st century needs to seriously evaluate the options we have to help in this regard. I now request Dr. Abid for his closing remarks. Dr. Is probably not available.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you very much. It was a real honor and a pleasure to have heard from all the four speakers. Of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, that the four, they came from their different areas of specialization. They touched upon their own areas of expertise. And one of the takeaways that I can take back from today's discussion is that while we are legitimately and rightly talking about having a right-based approach in Afghanistan, we are also concerned about the prosperity, the food security, the basic human needs of the people. While we are talking of international collaboration to support Afghanistan in the time of crisis, we also need to differentiately look at the needs of regional neighbors of Afghanistan, that how to empower them to actually support the Afghan people in need. And Brigadier Saab's very kind and very candid this holistic summary of the issue, the root cause of Afghan conflict and what could have been done. And I'm thankful to Ms. Andilib Abbas for informing us of how the West is appreciating Pakistan's role in helping Afghan evacuation process, and different foreign ministers who are coming to Pakistan for this. I know, ladies and gentlemen, that we are running out of time. We do have certain questions here in the chat box. I'll leave it to speakers if they would like to say, go through those questions and say any final comments. If not, we can conclude this session. Over to you, Aisha.
Thank you, sir. I think most of the questions here were addressed by the speaker. Some were comments. I went through them, and yes, they were mostly comments. Most of them are already addressed, so we can wind up now. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Ms. Andalib and Ms. Tammy Sharp, Zahid Hussain Saab and Brigadier Mahmood Shah for your kind comments and for your time. Inshallah, we'll continue doing webinars on the situation in Afghanistan as it unfolds, and we'll need your support in this regard. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.